Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Monday, May 10th, 2021. I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors. We did the flag salute at a meeting that was held prior to this one, so we'll move on to the welcoming of guests for tonight's meeting. We want to thank everyone who is here in the boardroom. Those of you that are online, thank you for joining us tonight as we conduct our business. Very much appreciate the fact that you folks take time out of your busy schedules to listen to what's going on in the district. I will entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
I will make that motion.
Motion's been made by Director Johnson. Can I get a second?
I will second that.
Seconded by Director Schutte. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Yessie, is there any public comment tonight? I would like to remind the public that there is an avenue for public comment, even in this COVID era. So please, when the announcement is put on social media, please, there is an avenue for you to still give public comment. Moving on to item B2, board member discussion. The first bullet on there is a ledge report. Director Stevenson.
Okay, so from WASDA, I think last time I read part 1 of their summary. Here's some of part 2. So here's the major K-12 investments. I think I might have mentioned some of these before. Transportation stabilization. This is just for the 2021 supplemental or 21-20 to 23 budgets. Transportation stabilization is $117 million. Technology, one portion of that detail is $23.5 million. School counselors, $51.6 million. Transition supports for students with disabilities, $17 million. Elimination of school lunch copays, $8.9 million. Para-educator training program, $14.8 million. I hope that there's people listening that are very excited about that. Expansion of the Regional School Nurse Corps, $14.8 million. So transportation and many other components, there was a huge request by many districts for, they had a huge change in their enrollment numbers this year compared to past. And so the legislature did do an enrollment stabilization. So let me read a paragraph about, or a couple paragraphs about that. The legislature also heard the need for some level to hold harmless funding for districts for 2021 due to the reduced enrollments. The solution does not rely on federal funding from the ESSER 2 funding stream, supplemented as necessary by state funding. The stabilization funding looks at a state funding calculation and compares it to the ESSER 2 funding the district was eligible for. If the state, this is a lot of details that maybe. Anyways, it was only a 1-year stabilization. There was a request for 2 or 3 years worth. They only approved 1 year worth. There were a couple of bills that addressed this specifically. Basic education programs, general apportionment, special education, transitional bilingual, highly capable, dropout re-engagement, career and technical education, transportation. So there's a lot of different things that our district wasn't hugely affected by this, but there were districts that had massive, like 20%, 50% enrollment changes. Because the funding is like 6 months behind, sometimes a whole year behind on different things. So luckily that doesn't affect us hugely. So Esser dollars. Esser is coming. I don't even know what Esser stands for. Does anybody know what Esser stands for? The full details of Esser is federal funding. What do you know what Esser's? Okay, so Esser, some of Esser, it's ESSER, elementary and secondary education. Anyways, it's federal funding that's coming from the federal government to help during COVID issues. So the way that the federal government distributed Esser funds was through Title I. There are many districts that don't have Title I or don't have a lot of Title I. And so there was a lot of inequities that were being seen across, and some of the different, so there's 3 different phases of Esser funds. We've already received 1, we're gonna receive 2 and 3. And so the state legislator let's see. So Esser funds for Title I is based on census poverty data and estimates, not actual enrollment or free and reduced price lunch data. So the legislature, in order to combat the inequities of that system, made a floor funding of Esser amounts, and then if a district is getting less than $500 per student, they're making it, between all 3 of those grants, they're making it so that they get $500 per student. And then, so anyways, there's some very interesting things that they've done to try to make that work out. There was some minor changes to levy and LEA, but these details don't affect us. So capital budget. There was a historic record-setting capital budget of $6.3 billion in total. It was a unanimous adoption in both the House and the Senate. There's 4 different budgets. There's a transportation budget, a general budget, capital budget. I can't remember the 4th one. Anyways, some of the funding priorities that WASDA really focused on was school construction, SCAP. They have $730 million that the capital budget put into that, and it's a 2-year budget. Broadband expansion, $411 million. We talked about that a little bit last time. Small district and tribal compact school modernization, $42 million. We are actually considered a medium-sized district, so that part doesn't affect us. School district health and safety, $7.2 million. And then remediation of lead and water, $3.6 million, and that does not affect us because through all of our reports that we've seen in the past, lead there's not found in our water at the schools. And then another interesting little piece of data, I attend, WASDA does weekly COVID update meetings. I attend probably 2 of 3 or 3 of 4. And they're going to do a report. They have a quarterly magazine called The Direct. Do you guys all get that? No. Okay. Hopefully that will be corrected and you'll get that. They actually asked me to give a quote about those training meetings, so I did. So Othello will be mentioned in the state magazine. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing while you're trying to turn on your mic. I think it's time, if you guys are interested in trying to meet as a board with our legislators again, all 3 of them, those that are able to, like we did in December before the session started. Is that something we're interested in again? Saying, hey, thanks. Here's things that we see as issues coming up. Thanks for holding the line, or we disagree with the vote you made, or whatever. Or just trying to keep those good communication lines open, not transportation.
If you can,
By Zoom.
if you can find out what
was
their
my
agenda's
intent.
like and
Okay,
see where we can work
I'll
it in.
check with them and their staff. So perfect. Thank you.
All right. I apologize. I forgot to ask, is there a need for translation tonight? Good. Thank you. Item number 2, we have a draft agenda for the Hiawatha Elementary School site visit. I would like to point out the time is 12 to 3:15. Thank you. And is it okay if we use the same, have the kids come with their questions like we did at the last visit? So if we could relay that, Pete, that would be awesome.
I know that we're talking about scrutiny in a little bit later on in the presentation, but feedback that after we talked to PSE in one of those groups, there was a person that came up, I think it was to Sharon and I, and said, "Who are you guys? What do you do? What's the importance of the board?" I think that we might need to address that in future meetings, just like in 1 or 2 sentences, especially with PSE, because we haven't met with them in the past. So we explained, we're elected, we only have 1 employee, that person runs the district. We just some of those details, and I just thought after everything, anyways, I was kind of embarrassed that we never addressed that. It's just always better to address that to everyone.
Note has been made. There is an exit conference audit on Friday from 11 to 12. Who is available to attend that? I know I will.
Will or will not?
I will.
Okay.
Anybody else available on Friday?
I could by Zoom.
Could we make that happen?
I think they're Zooming us,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So 2 of us? All right, so there'll be 2 of us attending. Hey, just battery here. Policy governance training that we had, if we can just have a quick discussion as to how that went, our thoughts. That is a segue into the last bullet there on our board member discussion. Needless to say, this will be something that will be discussed at the retreat on Friday. And maybe I'll just go into the details of that. Pete, Yessie, and I will get together on a formal agenda. That will take place Thursday from 12 to 5 at, I believe it's called the Lighthouse Building across the high school that belongs to Bethel Assembly. That is where we will hold our retreat this year. 12 to 5 on Thursday. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that we were able to have that training. After a long day, we all took an extra 3 hours to learn more about policy governance. We will have a discussion about it at the board retreat. I, for one, don't know if we're ready to make a finalized decision. In my conversation tomorrow with Pete, I plan to perhaps get an alternate governance model to have something to compare it with. But that will be one of the items discussed in addition to the calendar, which is something important. We'll go over the surveys. And if there's anything specific that you guys want on the agenda, email me tonight or first thing in the morning, and we'll see if we can't get that on the agenda.
Are we getting responses on the surveys?
Yes.
Oh,
We got
awesome.
all of them, is what she said.
Thank you. I thought that the training was awesome. I loved that he was very interactive with us and would let us, I wouldn't say go off on a tangent, but discuss the details of when we did that, when we didn't do that, come up with examples so that we could all understand the different components of that, and make sure that we understood specifically what he was talking about. I'm ready to change and rewrite some policies, but I have to wait until we make a decision. Just minor modifications and discussions, but
I thought it was really good. I learned a lot. So, I mean, we're not making a decision one way or the other until our retreat. Is that what you're saying, Mike?
Perhaps, maybe not even after the retreat. Maybe when we look
Okay.
at something different, think about that, mull it over, and then maybe at the board meeting after that, maybe come to a consensus as to which way we're going to go. We do need to come up with a decision soon, just based on how we're going to do things next year as far as if we stick with policy governance. I mean, the items on our calendar, some of us feel we're monitoring policies at different times of the year. They should be different, so we'll need to modify that if, in fact, we stick to that. So shortly after the retreat, unless, we're ready. I'm not going to rule that out either. If we're ready to make a decision on Thursday, that can also happen. But a discussion will definitely be had. All right, thank you for that. I also want to mention, this is for the public, we at the last meeting discussed an admin retreat with the board. Due to conflicting schedules, that'll take place sometime in August. Just want to let the community know that it hasn't been X'd out or anything, just dates didn't work for everyone, so that has been pushed into August potentially. Thank you, guys. Moving on to item B3. Lauren, thank you for being here tonight, and go ahead with your report if there is one.
Hi. Okay. I have a little bit to talk about today. So OHS is working on their plans for graduation, which will be June 4th. Today, wrestling and basketball practice started. The senior formal will be held May 22nd at CBHA. They have ordered an illusionist and outdoor games for the entertainment. And of course, no dancing. So this month, AP test and the STAMP test are being taken, and ASB officers for next year have been elected, and we will start the class officer elections next. Thank you.
Don't know if Elise is on Zoom. Okay. Thank you
Can-
for that, Lauren. Any questions?
Can you tell us student ASB officers?
Yes, let me find the email. So for president, we have Zach Rocha. The vice president is Ashley Perez. The treasurer is Ruby Escamilla. The secretary is Lolly Serrano. The publicity manager is Kenzie Simpson, and the assistant publicity manager is Sarah Hernandez.
Very good. All right. Thank you for that, Lauren. Moving on to item C1. I will entertain a motion for required approvals.
I have a few minor questions first. So, accounts payable.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad they've just handed down the mic to you already. So BSN Sports for $12,000. Can you give us what was that for?
Yes, those were for helmets for the high school,
Great.
football helmets.
Okay. We need to protect all those little brains
Yep.
and big brains. ESD 112 for $11,000.
That was for COVID supplies. We have a contract with them to buy.
Okay.
We're still purchasing
Where is
supplies.
ESD 112? We're part of 123, right?
Correct. 123 is Pasco, 112 is Spokane. Vancouver.
Okay, not that it matters, just was curious. ESD 123, so I know that we're part of that, $92,000.
Yes, so we have an absence management frontline. We pay a service to them of $6,100. We also were part of a language acquisition consortium for $13,000, and then we received 3 invoices for our psych services on April. It was for February, March, and April.
Okay,
So it was 3 months.
psych services, okay,
Mhm.
good to know. So it sounds like, was that the bulk of that one?
It should be, the full contract for this year was $202,000.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I think that's my details. I'm ready to make a motion to approve required approvals.
Okay, motion's been made by Director Stevenson to approve required approvals. Can I get a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Director Prowse. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Not that this is a question, but I know that we have an increasing mechanic wages, and I've seen on our school website that we're still hiring. Is that correct? And we just raised their wages. What a great time to be hired. Okay, just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Moving on to item C2, Superintendent Informational Items. Superintendent.
Thank you. We have 3 presentations tonight, and we want to make sure that we have an efficient use of time and make sure that everyone's comfortable with sitting there, right? In classrooms, oftentimes we need to be clear with students about what they should expect and what they should experience. And it also informs the planning for the teachers, and we're all teachers. And so we're gonna try something this evening. We're going to have two presentations. The initial one will be me and John Wiseman discussing the academic and student well-being recovery plan that's part of getting in line for Esser funding. We hope to be done in 10 minutes, and much of that will depend on questions from the board. The following presentation will be an ends report and a brief update. It'll be John and I again, joined by Principal from McFarland Middle School, Jessica Schenk, and Amy Paris, our Director of School to Career Initiatives. So you're going to see that clock. That's for us. If we go beyond the 10 minutes, we're going to keep talking, but I just wanted to let you know. It's a tool that we use from a training we had around meeting efficiency. It's from this book, Meeting Wise. We've been doing it for several years. We thought it might be a good experience for the board. So we're going to jump right in. Rigo's going to start the clock, and we'll go from there. Again, as a matter of federal compliance, Director Stevenson talked about the Esser funding. The state of Washington is required to provide evidence to the federal government that they are complying with the directives for the significant investment in public education that's happening across the country. So House Bill 1368 in the state of Washington requires that each school district by June 1st submit an academic and student well-being recovery plan. And then throughout the year, we report on those components and how we're doing with that plan. Tonight, we're delivering that presentation to the board. We'll bring it back at our next meeting on the 24th and ask for approval of that plan so that we can submit those meeting minutes and our plan in the OSPI template for approval from OSPI. The components of the bill specific to what happens in classrooms are around what kinds of assessments are we using to see what kind of unfinished learning do our students have because of the COVID experience. We're also required to identify learning and well-being gaps for particular groups of students through an equity analysis tool, and then talk about the instruction and supports and additional opportunities we're going to provide for students to help close some of the gaps that have been created by the pandemic and the loss of learning time. Next slide, please. And I think it's important that there are some ideas out there that come from OSPI. These are not representative of what the Othello School District is putting together, but I think it's important that teachers and families are aware that these are the kinds of conversations or dramatic changes to the schooling experience that may happen in some school districts. One is a balanced calendar, and that means a 12-month calendar. That, you know, the significant gaps that we have for what some people call summer melt or summer learning loss or summer slide. There's really a move across the country to consider alternate calendars. Additional school days and extending the school year, and additional time for students to catch up a little bit. So those are items that are being talked about across the country and certainly in our state, but they are not reflected in our particular plan. We're going to let you know what we're planning to do moving forward, and we'll welcome any questions from you.
All right, so these next slides will highlight the requirements, both to meet the recovery plan needs and also how the district is going to meet the academic and emotional needs of our students. So one of the first important steps that calls for the plan is to make this public, and like to get the information out to everyone. And so as Pete had mentioned, that we'll be coming back next week and seeking board approval for the plan. And then once that is approved, that it will be posted to our website so that all will have access to it and understand what is available for our students. With those components, it's also equally important that the districts use an equity tool or an equity lens to ensure that no child is being left out or discriminated against. And so our district is in a good spot because we already have adopted equity piece with EL 17. And so that's the tool that we're going to be using, or the lens that we're going to be using to ensure that all of our students' needs are being met. When we look at the third part, it calls for universal supports for all students. So what these are instructional strategies, tools, resources that are available for all of our kids, depending on what their needs are. So this is just a list or examples of some of the universal supports that we're using, from building of common assessments to the early learning that we're offering for our kids, narrowing of standards. All of those sort of components or pieces are things that will be available for our students. The fourth part of the plan looks at the diagnostic assessments. So while those universal tools are great, it wants to really narrow down, and it recognizes, the state recognizes that some student groups were impacted more significantly than other groups. And so the importance of using data to identify which students were impacted the most during this COVID and the closures and in online schooling and whatnot. And so these type of assessments are used for two specific things. One is around identifying the student strengths, where are they at currently, what have they mastered, and also to identify the specific learning needs or the gaps that are in their learning. When we met with the principals and we looked at all of the diagnostic assessments that we use across the district, and these are the ones that we have selected that will be used specifically for this report and for the purpose of identifying where our students are at in their learning. I know that's something that's of great importance to the board, and it's of great importance to us because it'll direct what our next steps need to be. Also with that, it's great to have these assessments and have data, but we need a process or a tool to really break that out and say, what are our next steps? And so you're going to see this slide again in the next presentation where we're going to go in greater depth with it. But I just wanted to call out that our school sites are going to be using the data-wise and the driven by data process to really disaggregate the data. The fifth part is around student and family voice, recognizing who are we serving. And what OSBI has called for is to provide examples of when we have reached out to the community. So we have done that through conferences, through the parent and student surveys, small group interviews, and the board, when you have met with those student groups and we've been in the room to capture that information, has been extremely helpful. And then having student representatives on the school board to share out concerns or things that they appreciate and to give voice to the work. The sixth part is around strategic supports for students. So while we looked at the universal goals of what is available for all, it was important for us to go in and identify which groups were most at risk for learning loss. And so in our district, we've identified our English language learners, low income students with disabilities, students that are experiencing homelessness right now, and students within foster care. But I really want to emphasize that these are general groups, and we have students within those categories that are achieving at extremely high levels. We also have students that are outside of those categories that are really struggling academically or socio-emotionally. And so these are certainly areas that we're going to watch for, but it is truly a student-by-student process in identifying those gaps. Part 7 is looking for the strategic support. So once you have the assessments and you identify who they are, well, now what? What are the resources and tools for them? And so this is a list of those. You're going to see some overlap with the universal because the work is the work. But what is different is how much and when these strategies are applied. And so some kids might need extra of something, or they might need to be provided tutoring or outside classroom experiences, right, to be able to help them catch up. So this has identified what those supports are for those student groups. And then in the 8th section, it's the monitoring of student progress. And so, as mentioned earlier, each school is going to be using multiple assessments to capture the data. We'll be using data-wise and driven by data to process and do an analysis of the data, and to do so through that equity lens. And we are committing as a district to do that at a minimum 3 times a year. In reality, these cycles are going to be happening within grade teams, and again, you're going to hear more about in the next presentation, some of that work, but it is an ongoing cyclical process. And the last component is really the state recognizing that all districts, this has been a first. This has been a challenge. And so really trying to network the strengths of each district. And so they called for what areas do we feel like we could be of assistance perhaps to other districts if they have questions or are looking for help, and then areas that we would like additional support in. So we have identified our common assessments and the data work that we're doing, early learning, which has been, thanks to Jennifer and her team, all the tremendous growth that our kids are making, and the narrowing of standards, which is how the state identifies it, but we refer to that as teacher clarity and really getting to the core, the essence of what students need to learn. When we look at some areas that we would like to partner with others is summer school. We've changed our summer school model this year. We're very optimistic that it's going to have some really significant changes for our students that participate, but we're always wanting to look at what others are doing and learn from them. And then also around the high quality tutoring. I know we have tutoring at the secondary level, but that's something that we haven't really focused on at the elementary level as far as that one-on-one. Certainly do small groups and walk-tos and those sort of examples, but just learning more about other systems and how they run their tutoring.
So again, out of an interest in making sure that the district is compliant with the recommendations or guidelines from OSPI in response to federal funding that is made available for school districts across the country, we're required to make this presentation to the board. You have a couple of weeks to consider it, to send questions our way. If you hear things from your constituents that they want clarity around, we would certainly welcome that, but you should expect that at our next board meeting on the 24th, we would present the plan for approval so that we could submit that approval to OSPI by June 1st.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry, Jen.
No.
How is summer school different, or what is your strategy for summer school this year versus years past that you feel like is going to be more effective?
Sorry about that. So in the past, one of the models has been we would select, speaking to the elementary level, a site. So let's say it was Scootney was hosting summer school, and then we would pull kids from each of the other schools to go there and participate. One of the challenges with that was the registration, because we only had a certain number of seats. So certainly we're trying to get the students that needed it most, but because of the numbers, at times there was kind of some sites, because they got the message out earlier than others, would fill more seats. And so this year at the elementaries, Hiawatha students are going to attend summer school at Hiawatha, Scootney at Scootney, Lutacaga at Lutacaga, and Wahidas at Wahidas. One is it's going to be more equitable because everyone will have the same number of students from each site that get to participate. Second is that there's already relationships that are being built, or that are established, because they know those teachers, they know those students. It's easy to get student information. And third, the students don't have to learn a new school, a new campus, and so we feel like they won't lose days lost in the beginning learning those things, that it can be right from the get-go. Similar faces, similar curriculums, and really can act in some ways as an extension of the school year.
Have you expanded the program to where you're accepting more students this summer than you have in years past?
I think that and correct me if the numbers will be roughly the same. There isn't significantly more, but what will be different is that, again, that they'll be equal for each site.
In many of those WASDA meetings I have been attending, they've been discussing this plan for a really long time. And hearing superintendents and board members freak out about all of the multiple phases and all of so many specific details and the amount of time that it's taking to do it, I just want to say congratulations for doing a kick-ass job, being ready, and already being ready, and just having it all together, and having the plan before the plan was even required to have a plan. Also, I loved seeing that there's well-being assessments. I don't think that we've ever seen as a board that those exist and that they're being done. And because we know without having the SEL component of every student, their needs being met, the academic needs can't be addressed, or can't be addressed as readily if those needs aren't being met. So that is great to see that those already exist. And so thank you so much. Congratulations. I'd like to stand up and clap. Maybe I'll just sit. But yay, thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments about that? We'll look forward and send it to you in consent agenda, I imagine, for the next board meeting. We're going to transition now to an ends report. Certainly going to have Jessica Schenk step up to this side of the table to help us out with the presentation, and Amy Paris as well, just so that there's a little bit better flow. So while they're transitioning, just a reminder for the board that Certainly, this is an unusual year for a number of reasons, not only the pandemic, but also a transition in superintendency here towards the end of the school year. So if we could go to the next slide. I did want to take a moment just to remind us all, not only the board, but the community. You can go ahead and start, Rigo. Yeah, thank you. But the purpose of the ends, the governance training that we had the other day certainly said that those are the goals, right? You could replace ends with the word goals or outcomes or targets, and that we should be able to share with the community what our goals are and at what cost we're going to deliver on those goals. Again, highlighted stay there please, the uniqueness of the year and the fact that there's some transition and then the response to the pandemic. But also I think it's important that we continue to evaluate everything that we do in our system, including how we report success or challenges that we're facing. Also, you are in a unique position, as you all have indicated even earlier today in the board discussions, your own consideration of a governance model. And certainly the idea of ends and outcomes and monitoring progress is a significant component of policy governance. And whether or not that can exist outside policy governance is something that I know you are exploring. So tonight, you're not going to hear about the status of the system. Here's how kids are doing. We expect that we would share that data with you towards the end of June or perhaps into July. But we want to share with you some options that we would give you some time to think about, that maybe you would discuss at your board retreat and then into the summer as you wrestle with the governance model moving forward. So I think it's important that we talk a little bit about the past, and when I say the past, it's the last 4 or 5 years when we've reported out on the ends. Next slide, please. And typically you would see this set of metrics around these series of indicators saying, here's the progress we've made this year. We send you that scorecard and share with the board that this is how we think we did as a system, and then it's up to the board to demonstrate or to make a determination of whether or not the system made sufficient progress. What we want to talk about is the present, so the uniqueness of this school year, but also the future and how ends reports may look moving forward, whether or not there's a shift in governance or not.
So as we consider options for future ends report, this would be one option, and that would be to adopt a series of aspirational research-based benchmarks. And these benchmarks would kind of, in essence, become the North Star for the district, right? Provide the direction of what we're working towards and wanting to achieve for our students. This is just an example of how it might look. Certainly a first draft, it's the big draft across there. But each of these benchmarks is grounded in research and is truly critical to student success. So not going through all of them, but just a couple. So for example, the third graders will learn to read on grade level. Third grade is an interesting year because it's a transition where they transition from learning how to read to reading to learn. And if they miss that, then they miss out on all these gaps in the curriculum as they move forward. One study found that students who are not proficient in reading by the end of third grade were 4 times more likely to drop out of high school than proficient readers. So very significant. Another example is the 9th grade on track to graduate. That if a study shows that 9th graders in the 9th grade year that are on track for graduation are 3.5 times more likely to graduate than their off-track peers. It's amazing how critical that freshman year is and their success. And so when we look at these and we consider, yep, thanks. 100% of our students meeting the benchmarks is certainly a lofty goal, but they're so important that that's what we want to strive to. So the communication around that would be not only the actual data, as Pete talked about, 87% in this category or whatever that might be, but also to describe to the board what sort of steps are we taking, what professional learning are we giving to teachers, what curriculum changes are we making, what instructional design changes are we doing in order to reach those goals. And when we get to those data processes, those are going to very much inform what those decisions should be.
This next slide is an example of how we would look at this work at the building level. So it's not just enough to say 100% of 9th graders will pass algebra. There's work that goes into making that happen. So there's three things that you see there. One is what students would do. And again, this is just an example of how this could look. At the end of 6th grade, students will be able to identify the math pathway they will take to ensure they pass algebra by the end of 9th grade. We're starting some new things at McFarland this year that we're asking 6th graders to really think about how they want to take on math in 7th and 8th grade, because it does affect what happens to them in 9th grade. Teachers and principals will use a variety of different assessments to monitor and support that student progress toward algebra and beyond. And then principals will also regularly provide support for teachers through the structures of data analysis and instructional feedback. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, so that when we report back to you, we'd be able to say, this is what we did for each of those pieces, and either it worked or it didn't, and here's why. So next slide, please. We've talked about it a little bit today, and I know you've heard about it in previous meetings, but two of the structures that we would like to use to ensure that we're able to provide that support to our teachers and ultimately to our students is the DataWise system and also driven by data. DataWise, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to a training to learn about how to provide leadership through DataWise. And in my nearly 20 years in education, it is by far one of the best professional development trainings that I have been to. And I evidenced that by the fact that when I came back to Othello, I was able to put that to work right away at McFarland. And when you think about a lot of the good things that you've seen happen at McFarland the last 2 years, I credit to this work. You'll see that there are 8 stages, and they call that the DataWise swoosh, because it kind of curves around on each other. But the first stage there is to organize for collaborative work. And at McFarland, we reorganized ourselves to work better together, to learn how to hold more effective meetings. I mean, there's nothing worse than a meeting that you don't feel like you get done what you want to get done. The clock that you see that we're using at the meeting tonight, that comes from that. And when people can rely on what's happening in a meeting, and they know, whose job it is to say what and do what, you build trust and you feel like you're more effective in your work. So we did that. And now this last year, our 7th grade math team has really dived into almost all of those stages. We're not quite there because the year's not over. And I think there's a lot of things we would do differently if we had the chance to do it again. But that's why it curves on itself. It's a cycle, and we keep getting better. So the work that the 7th grade math team did was to really look at what we see students struggling with and what we want them to do better with. And it's not just about saying, oh, the kids don't get it. It's what are we going to do as instructors to change our practice so that the kids have a better chance of getting to the levels that we want them to be at. And so you'll see through the cycles, it might be a little bit small for you there, but in addition to learning more about being able to analyze data and work with data, it's also about examining an instruction and then actually developing a plan. It's not just talking, it's doing. And assessing that plan and then coming back and saying, did we meet our goals? Did we not? And how can we do better next time?
And the driven by data is a similar process, and it's something that all 4 of our elementary schools are doing, each at their own site, but doing together, like supporting one another in with that. We've had an opportunity to do a book study this year around it and have professional training that way. We've had Wahidas, Sandy Anderson and Justin Johnson met with the other elementary admin and presented lessons learned from their approach in this. And so it's been really neat to see the collaboration that's happening across the district with it. Similar to DataWise, it is a cycle. And just at a real high level, you develop a scope and sequence for the year. What is going to be taught? When is it going to be taught? What assessments are going to be used? Then you create those interim assessments that are directly tied to those learning standards. When they're given, the principal and the teachers roll up their sleeves together and they work at disaggregating the data and looking at it and saying, where were we successful? Meaning, where were the students learning and where did we miss? And when we find out where those gaps are, we don't just say, darn it, right? You go back and say, all right, well, now planning together, we're going to introduce the next set of learning standards, but also make sure that we bring back those standards that weren't mastered yet. And so students have an opportunity for that. And it's really a collaborative process between our amazing teachers, our principals, instructional coaches, in going through and doing the work as mentioned earlier, student by student, because that's where the gains made is in that process.
So Pete talked about how we're looking at the past and we're looking at the present, but we'd also like to share some ideas about the future and looking at how we might look at our work as a system and report out not only to the board but to the community, to our students, to our parents about are we serving their needs. And so work that we've been doing for the last few months is on something called a graduate profile. And Amy in a minute is going to get into more detail about it. But it's really, in essence, a promise to our community about what we say an Othello High School graduate will have when they leave, and what all of us in the system from pre-K up to 12th grade are doing year by year to meet that promise. This slide here is an example of one of the online trainings that we did with this work. We're not just making this up. A graduate profile really needs to be grounded in evidence. It needs to be grounded in best practices. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see it says form. So there's different ideas about how it should look. And then there's also ideas about content. What should the meaning within the graduate profile be? And how, more importantly, are we going to measure whether or not we've met those goals? So with that, I'll turn it to Amy.
All right, I get the fun part. I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, we started to really, we heard about this in numerous different trainings and conferences that we went to, and really picked up that high-flying school districts had a graduate profile. So we were like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's really dig into it. And to me, the stars kind of are all in line right now, because we're all on the same page with wanting, what we can talk about data, we can talk about all of these processes, in our educational circles, but I think it's really important that our community has buy-in with our kids, that our parents do, that our bus drivers do, our pre-K teachers, everybody who touches our kids. And one way to do that is kind of having a united vision. So this is a draft, but basically what you're looking at here are 5 dispositions that a group of leaders have spent a lot of time kind of coming up with. And Jessica mentioned it's a promise to our kids. So when you have been part of the Othello School District, and in specific graduate from the Othello School District, we want to promise you that you're going to be a learner, you're going to be a communicator, a critical thinker, a collaborator, and an advocate. And in specific, we have some kind of real brief phrases for what that means. So once we get this graphic exactly how we want it and do a little bit more work, this will be everywhere. This will be the preschool teacher who says, I have a piece in that. I know how to teach 4-year-olds how to critically think. We have, bus drivers who want to talk about communication, and we'll start to use this language in everything we do, including how we measure ourselves. So a learner is going to master academic standards needed to be successful. A communicator is going to share ideas and listen to understand. A critical thinker will identify problems and seek creative solutions. Collaborators work effectively with others and accept feedback. And advocates make personal, civic, and global contributions. So when this becomes a live document, you'll be able to click on Advocator, for example. And then the next slide shows what you'll see. So we're beginning to drill down on what an actual graduate profile looks like and how it's going to connect to like an ends report from what we've done in the past. So an advocate would be able to, again, you see, makes personal, civic, and global contributions. Well, then we have 3 or 4 more specific phrases and statements that we want to really drill into our kids. I seek to make a positive global impact. I can speak out for myself and others. I participate actively in the civic process, and I manage my emotions in a difficult situation. So all of the things that we think as educators are important are somewhere embedded in our graduate profile. Then you'll be able to click on each one of those pieces and go deeper. And this work would be happening in the buildings, specifically to grade levels or age bands. This is an example of what a high school advocate might look like. Two of the things that we talked about on the last slide. I manage my emotions in a difficult situation. So we actually find standards about that. Washington has social emotional learning standards and benchmarks that address that very thing. So being able to demonstrate the skills to manage your emotions, thoughts, impulses, and stress in constructive ways. So the work is really developing rubrics and ways to measure and instruct and model in all of our buildings at every level about these particular things. The next one is that I can speak out for myself and others. This is about advocacy. That I can demonstrate awareness and the ability to speak out on behalf of personal rights and advocacy. The next one is an example of, so if you went back to the graduate profile and clicked on learner. So a learner would, we can see a little bit deeper. I set academic goals and achieve them. I can master content standards in all areas. I build on prior knowledge and I can apply information to new settings. So those are the things that we believe a really good, strong learner, effective learner would be able to portray those examples. And then the following slide would be a middle school example of the learner category. And these are actual math standards and claims that show I can master content standards in every area, in particular math here. I can show connections between proportional relationships, lines, and linear equations. And then the next one, building on prior knowledge, we find a standard that helps us be able to do that. Take a variable, help solve pairs and simultaneous linear equations. So hopefully you can start to see the work that will happen at individual grade teams and buildings, but it will all be a common, consistent language, and everybody's focused on the same thing. So everybody has a piece in developing these whole child kids in our system.
Before we jump on to the next steps, because we still have 3 minutes, I'm going to step back to this one and ask for a volunteer from the board. So who would like to volunteer themselves? I mean, all you have to do is sit there. Lindsay. So let's say Lindsay was a graduate of the Othello School District.
I was.
Just to pretend. And somebody called and said, can you tell us about Lindsay? And so I'm going to use my observations of you as a board member in these dispositions, these areas. If you moved to Florida and they said, hey, Lindsay's going to run for board in Florida, can you tell me about her? And so imagine if I just used those 5 categories and I said, well, Lindsay's a learner. She's been on the board about 1.5 years, and I've seen her dig in to try and learn what it means to be a board member. And as she's learning about things, I can also tell you she's a really good communicator because she asks a lot of questions. And when she asks them, I can tell that they're really thoughtful because she's a critical thinker. She thinks before she speaks, and she's not afraid to share her voice. And to be able to speak in that way and to be an effective board member requires collaboration. And so she collaborates not only with her constituents, but also with the other board members. And she's doing that because she's an advocate for our kids and our community. So you should consider Lindsay as a qualified board member, right? If you think about people in that way, about those dispositions, they're really, really powerful. And if we had kids like
I love
that,
this game. That made me feel so good.
if we had kids come out of our system with those dispositions and skills, then we're fulfilling the promise that we're making to our community. And so we think, paired with some of those research-based benchmarks, that this is an excellent way for us to demonstrate that we're really proud of our kids. Because if we have to answer the question, do we have great schools, and how do we know that? Well, we might initially say it's because we have great staff and great teachers, but then we would also say we have really good kids, really skilled graduates that we're proud of. So the next steps for us in the next couple of slides are really taking this work to the community and sharing with them. We've talked about using the equity team as sort of a focus group to just get some initial feedback. It's very much in draft form. And then at the start of the school year next year, getting some feedback from the staff before we consider it and roll it out in a more broad way. But tonight was intended to show the board kind of where we've been, where we are now, and capturing this critical time in our system where we might be able to roll forward with something different. We're not looking for a determination. We're not looking for a decision. We just wanted to let you know how we're thinking about the work and to provide that update for you about all the hard work that's been happening, because much of the work reflected in here that we all got to share was really powerful work from our building administrators and their learning coming from their conversations with their staff. So we're really excited to take this back and get some feedback from them, but we also wanted to get some feedback from the board.
I'll go first. So part of my difficulty with adopting policy governance is I wasn't resonating with the ends. And when I read them, they felt very wordy. And for me, your OSD benchmarks, that's what I'm talking about. These are the kinds of things that resonate with me that I feel like anybody can understand what it means when we say we want 100% of our kindergartners ready for kindergarten. Like these are benchmarks that are clear to the board, to the community. There's not very many ways you can misinterpret them. And I felt like somebody like took a note out of my brain and put it on paper. So I love these. All of these are things that I feel passionate about, that I have thought about, that have bothered me in the past. And so I love this. These OSD benchmarks are spot on. I love them.
So I guess kind of Amy, when you were discussing the I can master content standards in all areas, I build on prior knowledge, because there was like the high school one and the middle school one. So you would have the idea, and the theory is once this is accepted, perfected, fine-tuned, all of that, you would have this for at least different grade bands, potentially for every grade. Is that
Right.
okay?
So it'll kind of be up to each building. They'll have their own version. We'll have an OSD skeleton sort of, but each version will, each building will say, okay, how does McFarland take the grad profile and run? What's important to them? And so I think you'll see a little bit different flavor in each building, which I love, the autonomy, but we are all talking consistent language. So as many standards as we choose to pick, as we get moving, we might determine maybe guidelines, but I really think based on each building's initiatives and where they're really focusing, they'll be able to find the standards that they feel are important and that lend themselves to being a learner and a critical thinker and a collaborator and all those.
Great. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Looks wonderful. Love the idea. And after I read through this, I actually went and read all of our ends, and it hits so many different components and gets it all, because when I had first heard, oh, we're going to do this graduate profile, I was like, but that's what the ends are. And that to see that there is so much correlation, and that it really is like what Lindsay had said in a different way. It takes the ends and simplifies them, and then helps with the drill down and all those kinds of things. So wonderful. Definitely on the right path. I know you're still going to be, it's Jell-O right now. It's not marble, but I'm loving the Jell-O version. Yes?
So I am totally excited about this. I also, with Lindsay, was very uneducated on the ends. We had it upon us, but we didn't really understand it fully. This is wonderful. This profile, every student is important, is what you're telling us. Every student has a profile. I don't see anything but success. And I do know that my own granddaughter has taken a little survey, and this is how you're doing it with the younger students. You're getting them involved, getting them ready for this. It's really exciting. I think we're really going to be moving forward for everyone, and I'm pretty happy that we can understand it ourselves a little more better.
Like everybody else, I'm excited about it. It to me, it just makes it a lot more clear and very easy to understand. And it also takes the students and it looks at them as a whole at all different areas. And I'm just really excited about it and looking forward to the direction that.
Your summary, basically, the bullets are the purpose of the ends, uniqueness of this year, the continuous quality improvement and governance discussion. Well, I think the simplification of the ends is masterful. The uniqueness of this year, I'll discount that bullet because you guys have worked through the uniqueness of this and still even through it, you guys are focusing on what's important, so I commend you all for that. And this can't do anything but improve our quality. As I sat here, I don't know if it was on purpose, but in the presentation we had the learner, and when you started with the advocate, and I was going to say, okay, that's a high schooler, and this was middle school. But then you mentioned the inclusiveness of even a pre-K teacher saying, hey, I have a part in this. So everybody's involved, every student is included in this. And you definitely knocked it out of the park on the governance discussion. I think that might simplify it for our board retreat on Thursday. Very impressive presentation, team. Thank you very much. And I don't know if you have anything else you guys want to add.
No, we appreciate the feedback, and we'll continue to process it, put it in front of our folks, and particularly our teachers and the rest of our support staff. We know this will be a lengthy process, and lots of work that will be done over the summer. We look forward to the governance discussion that the board's going to have, and before we turn that jello into something more solid. So appreciate the feedback.
Awesome. Thank you once again. Moving on to item C3, we have a pre-approved presentation to the board from the superintendent staff. I'll let Pete introduce our guest tonight.
Yeah, our target was to be done by 8 o'clock because we know that it's really important that you hear from the Scootney Stars. We didn't want to step on their toes, but it was important information for the board to hear. So we're excited for the opportunity for Scootney to share with you their work. We know that you had a chance to visit their school recently, and I think they're ready to go.
Yeah, we're very excited to be here tonight and share a little bit about our work and our celebration. So thank you.
This is actually our favorite topic, so thank you for having us here. I don't think anybody would argue that this year has been unique and challenging and has pushed us to find solutions to very complex problems in meeting the needs of our students. But we are so proud of our staff and our students for not giving up and keep pushing forward. They have done a great job. Our teachers, more than ever, have been engaged in problem solving and going the extra mile, and they do this because we know what we do matters. Teachers, more than ever, have been burning the candle at both ends, texting and emailing, using talking points to communicate with families to make sure that there's an open line so that everybody's on the same page, all while preparing and delivering content asynchronously and now, thank goodness, synchronously. But this has been challenging. But I want you to know all of this hard work is not in vain because we have had some great successes this year, and we want to share a few of those with you. So if you look at this graph right here, it tells a wonderful story. When we started online, we were very concerned for all of our students, but particularly for our kinders. This was going to be their first formal introduction to education, and we were really worried about them. Preparing and delivering foundational skills for kinder students is really, really challenging. But this did not deter our teachers. They used the summer to brush up on their technology, to find resources and share ideas so that they could deliver a content-rich instruction. And they did. When we came back, we took very precious, valuable time to kind of get a baseline for our students. So we assessed them right when they come in. And you can see here that they were at 28% proficient, and this is our math proficiency, and 56 that were below benchmark. 2 months later, we decided to retest to find out what in-person did for our students, and this graph is living proof of things that we already know. Kids learn better in person. We were doing the best we could with what we had, but they have risen to the occasion. And here you can see that they have grown to 65% proficient on this math test and 29%. So they have shrunken that below benchmark and have done a wonderful job. 2 months later, now this month, we are going to be assessing our students again, and we are so excited, and we're dying to see the results because they are just flourishing.
So the next celebration that we want to talk about is first grade whole words read. And as you heard in the earlier presentation, getting students to proficiency in reading at 3rd grade doesn't start in 3rd grade. It starts in kindergarten with letters and sounds. In 1st grade, 2nd grade, there's a lot of work that happens before that. One of the main components in 1st grade that we're really working on is students being able to put together the sounds instead of just blending the words, being able to see and read words as whole words. It's one of the fluency pieces that we're really focusing on. So we're really excited to show you this graph where we went from January being 35% proficient in the whole words read to in March being 51% proficient. And then again, seeing that below benchmark chunk moving from 58% to 38%. And what you see there is that we are closing those learning gaps. We are getting those kids those skills that they need so that they have a better chance of being readers at 3rd grade. They're putting in the work. Teachers are putting in the work. Kids are putting in the work. We've been very focused and intentional in our instruction. And so just a celebration for 1st grade whole words read.
And moving to 4th grade, kind of talking about our upper level. This is a graph of the math STAR data. 4th grade, math is an area that we really keep a close eye on because traditionally we have seen a drop in scores as they transition from 3rd to 4th grade. And this is for various reasons, but a couple of those are math becomes a little more abstract. The level of rigor rises and the complexity increases. But looking at this graph, we have some celebrations because we didn't drop students, we actually gained students. And again, looking at the below benchmark, we closed the gap. So we're continually closing that gap from 40 to 28. But we are so excited that we are changing the trajectory, that we're going up. We're not dropping those students. So this was very, very exciting.
So thank you for celebrating those with us. That's kind of this year, and we wanted to give you just a little bit of an update about how in-person instruction is going. But now we want to talk a little bit about the work. This is the work that we are undertaking at Scootney. It's the work that we've been undertaking at Scootney for the last 4 years, and we really feel like this is the right work. So we have focused on this framework around intentionality, engagement, and community. And these 3 pieces are so intertwined and so entangled that there's really no way to separate them, but we're going to try. But you're going to hear us when we're talking about community, you're going to hear us talking about intentional community. When you hear us talking about engagement, you're going to hear us talking about how community impacts that. So these 3 pieces, intentionality, community, and engagement, really inform all of the work that we're doing. If we're doing a professional development about it, if we're giving feedback to teachers, it's going to be in one of these 3 areas because this is the focus and the framework for our work.
So we're just going to start off with intentionality. And intentionality means being deliberate and purpose-driven in everything that we do. So what this means for teachers and for leaders is being very clear on what we're teaching and why. So when we think about teacher clarity, feedback, and visible learning, is that teachers really understand and know their content. And this is so important because when teachers are very clear in what they're teaching, we're more effective. And so it's breaking down the standards and finding out what are those priority standards, what do they mean for the teacher, what do they mean for the student, and being very clear about what they're teaching. And then with feedback, as we go into the classrooms, we're looking for that intentionality. We're looking for what the students are doing, and then giving feedback and giving guidance for next steps. So currently, this year, we've been working on unit plans. Deborah and I have met with each grade level team to start unit planning for both reading and math. And we look at those priority standards and how are we going to teach them in what order and what do we need to make them effective. So as you see, exploring discourse and active engagement is part of that unit planning. We're looking for opportunities or we're building in opportunities for that student discourse and active engagement, which we will go into more in depth in a little bit. And really thinking about next steps, like where is this work going? We're going to take it to the next level in scope and sequences. So we're currently and will be working on a scope and sequence for math and reading in every grade level. So what are we teaching, what part of the year, and then building those assessments so that we can monitor. And really this is all work getting ready for that driven by data work that John talked about earlier. He did a really great job in explaining that, so I won't go into that any further. But part of that, a component, is really breaking down the assessment by at the student level and figuring out where's their misconception and what do we need to do to reteach that concept or that skill.
So the next section is engagement. And with engagement, our focus has been around student participation in the activities, intentionally planning activities that allow for active engagement, and then working on the motivation for students. So some of that work has centered around setting purpose. That kind of goes back to that teacher clarity piece and the intentionality. When kids know what they're learning and why, they're more engaged in the lesson and in the learning, especially if you can set a purpose that has meaning for them, a real life application of what they're learning. So really working on being intentional with our planning and with our teacher clarity work so that we can set purpose for our students. Another piece that we're really focusing is on discourse or academic conversation. You'll hear both of those terms kind of used interchangeably. And intentionally planning opportunities for students to engage in that discourse or to engage in that academic conversation. And then that one was actually a little bit more challenging this year because I'm sure, as you've heard, like when kids came back from their online learning, they were a lot more quiet. They were a lot quieter. And so we had to really be intentional and thoughtful about how we were going to pull the conversation out of them and get them speaking, get them talking, get them actively engaged in their learning instead of just sitting and listening. And that kind of brings us back to that next one, which is active versus passive engagement. I can be passively engaged by like leaning back and listening as my teacher is explaining something, or I can be actively engaged. An example would be if I'm going to listen to my teacher read a story, or if I'm going to read the story to my partner. One of them is very passive, the other is much more active. So being intentional about the activities that we're planning so that we can plan for active engagement versus passive engagement. Being intentional about planning for discourse because that increases their active engagement. When they're talking about the learning, they're more active in their learning. So those three things are currently what we're working on. And then taking that to the next level is we really are going to continue to refine that work and to dig deeper in that work. An example of that is a book study that we've purchased books for all of our teachers for next year, which is centered around academic conversation. And we've done a really great job of getting kids talking. So we have them conversing now, and now it's time to take it to that next level. So how do we make those conversations even more intellectual, even more effective, and even more engaging for the learning? So that's an example of what we're going to be doing next year around engagement.
So the last big umbrella we have is community. And we have been very intentional in building community over the last few years. So our focus has been classroom communities. So in classrooms, they become their own little community. Really thinking about social skills and giving students those skills to help regulate, and then focusing on social and emotional learning. To the point that we really feel that this has become our culture. This is just what we do. And so we felt at this point we would like some other people in our building to tell the story of what we do and the impact that it's having through a short video.
SEL is social emotional learning, but for me, it's just a part of a bigger initiative of community building.
I am 8 years old. What do you say? Okay, we gotta try that one again.
So all those things are important for kids because it helps get them into a space where they can learn. It's really hard to learn new things when you're nervous or when you're afraid or when you don't feel safe. So all of those are critical to help getting their brains into a space where they can do their best learning. So when you're walking around Scootney, you'll see the SEL work happening in many different ways. You might see it in a second step lesson happening in the classroom, which is very explicit instruction around social emotional learning. You might see it in a morning meeting or in a fun game that students are playing in order to help build that community. You will see it in our counselor's office with small groups, having maybe doing a social skills group and having fun together there while also building those social skills. You'll see it in the office, even as students are coming in with issues or having behavioral concerns. Hopefully you'll see it everywhere in everything that we're doing.
So I have started social skills groups for kids, friendship groups. With the older girls, I like to do like a self-esteem, confidence building group, but I start them to just help them become better friends. Being out of school for as long as they were, it just gives them that time to connect in like just a fun and unique way.
I learn about like how to be a gooder friend and yeah.
Do you like coming to this group? Have you made friends here?
Yeah.
So social emotional learning is something that we have strived for as a school to embed in everything that we do. So some of the trainings that we do here at Scootney have been restorative practice, second step, morning meeting, and toddlers to teens. This is my 5th year teaching here at Scootney Springs. The first 3 to 4 years, I did morning meeting in my classroom every single day, which consisted of a greeting, a question where students would have a chance to share, and then an activity or game that went with the question. So this year is my first year using second step. And in second step, it's more of a holistic approach to social emotional learning, and I've really enjoyed second step, and so do my kids. It's super engaging, it's quick, but it has helped students have tools to regulate their emotions and being able to identify them and then moving on from there.
So we know it is so important for all of our staff to connect with our kids. It's all about communication and connection. The little things like greeting them in the morning or afternoon, asking them about their day and finding out what they like and do not like. The most simple things can help them open up to us and they see that you care.
Nuestros niños más pequeños luchan por manejar las emociones para expresarse. Esta herramienta ayuda a los estudiantes a identificar y expresar sus sentimientos. Tratamos de permitir que nuestros estudiantes se tomen un momento para que se reúnan y cuando estén listos pueden venir y hablar con nosotros. Les aseguramos a los estudiantes que pueden hablar con nosotros y que podemos tratar de encontrar juntos una solución para sus problemas.
I have 2 daughters here at Scootney Elementary. I really love having them at Scootney. I love their teachers. I have great communication with their teachers and they genuinely care about my daughters, and I can tell that just the way they communicate with me. My oldest daughter, she's a great student, but she struggled learning from home. She would get flustered and frustrated, so I love that she has the opportunity now that she's back in the classroom to learn more than just academics, learn how to handle her emotions.
Tengo 2 niños aquí en Scootney y la verdad uno de ellos sufría bullying. Entonces estaba un poco mal mi niño porque realmente él ya no quería venir a la escuela. Yo realmente estoy muy agradecida con los maestros de Scootney, especialmente con el maestro Lucas y con el que ahorita está mi niño, porque realmente fueron los que se preocuparon por su bienestar.
So then, once again, the work at Scootney has been and will continue to be around the framework of intentionality, engagement, and community. We feel like it's the right work. We're really excited to continue to take that work to the next level. And, thank you for letting us share a little bit about what we're so passionate about.
Thank you.
You have questions for it?
I think we can go around the table here and give our thoughts about our visit and what's been presented tonight.
I love that video. That was so good. That made me even emotional. I think everybody knows my kids go to Scootney, so I think Scootney's the best. Just kidding. No, I love Scootney. I think I think you guys have great teachers, and all of these things. It's very obvious when you're on campus. And my first grader, she's so happy to be back in person school, and she has a parrot in her class that she's just one of those people that has made an impact in my daughter's life that she'll always remember. And I don't know if it's just the year or what, but I also have a third grader and a fifth grader, and their teachers are also so impactful. So I don't know if it's the work that you're doing, or if it's the year, or if it's the combination of both. But they all have teachers this year that I think that they will look back on, and those will be the teachers that made the biggest impact in their lives. And so I just want to say I love coming to your campus. Everything was really great. Your presentation was awesome. I loved communicating with your staff and everything that we saw while we were there. So congratulations on being awesome. It was really great.
I think all of us enjoy coming to your campus. It is always great to see staff that are excited to see us and friendly. Definitely that community from so many different aspects is definitely is seen. And I've said it multiple times before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, about SEL is so key. If social emotional learning is not addressed, then the academic learning isn't going to happen. And when SEL started coming out to the forefront a few years ago, hearing people say, to add something else to our plate, this is just not something we can do right now. SEL is the plate. If the plate's broken, the rest isn't going to happen. And so I decided to give every campus a word or a short phrase this year. And the word that I want to give you guys is intentional SEL. I know that's not just one word. After coming to your campus and hearing about the Big Life Journal, I went home and bought one for my daughter, even though it was like $20. And that you guys have one for every single student to be able to work on those aspects. I think that's what you guys said. Oh, 4-6. Yeah. Well, awesome, because my kid's in 6th, or in 5th. Oh my gosh, thank you. Anyways, I did say, hey, I would love to see what you write, but you don't have to. Anyways, it was great to be able to get that, so that was a wonderful idea, and I love that it's not just one specialist that's working on it. It's a whole community, the whole school is definitely seeing that. So thank you very much for working on those.
Thank you.
I definitely had a great time visiting, and I think one of the things is we'd been at the upper 7th through 12th grade classes prior. We did see the quietness of them, but when we got there, your students just had so much to say. And then I had an invitation to go to Earth Day, and I went there, and that was wonderful. That was so wonderful to see every student engaged, whether they were outside or inside. And then the little boy that spoke when we were at the school came up to me and goes, "I know you." And I thought, that's really something to think that we came for just that little 15, 20 minutes, and he remembered us. The hands-on I love hands-on, and what I saw that day was wonderful. Thank you, Denise, for taking me around. It was so engaging, and I wish everybody would have thought of that, because it was a wonderful experience for all the students. The news broadcasts, I've been reading and listening to all of those. They're wonderful. That's really giving students so much confidence. You can see them, they're just enjoying it by every means of the way. So I think you really did have got the SELs down, and thank you very much.
I enjoyed my visits. You got some great staff there.
Bias.
Yeah, I would have to say that. If I said anything else, I think I'd be in trouble. But they are wonderful. They all work together wonderful. Denise, you mentioned something in the starting of your presentation about introducing kindergartens to their education. And I couldn't imagine being a kindergarten teacher this year, starting the school year the way it did, introducing them to their education. I believe pre-K through 3 is some of the most important times of their education because it sets them up for the rest of their education. And being a kindergarten teacher, thinking, how am I going to do this? I'm introducing them to education, but they're going to be at home and they're going to be on a computer. And hopefully they have a parent that's there to help them out and start. But they did it. They kept going at it and plugging away at it. And when they finally got them back in, you could see it by the scores and the change. So I'm really impressed, and I'm really grateful for your staff and for you guys for continuing that and doing that.
I tell you what, this is a pretty good team because every one of my bullets has already been discussed, so I don't want to take up all your time because we still have some more stuff. But I highlighted Jen's word. Is she going to forget? But she hit intentional SEL, which was perfect. So I just want to thank you. And I know, like I've always said this, you guys are quick to pass the kudos on to your staff. You should. It is visible that the environment, from the moment you walk in to Cynthia's always laughing, and everybody's having a good time. It's a very welcoming environment. So thank all of you, man. You guys are awesome. Your above and beyond attitude, burning the candle at both ends, is evident. The care that you guys have for the students is also evident. I said it that day when we were at the school. The engagement from the students was palpable. I mean, it was evident, and that was good to see. After listening to your intentionality and your engagement in your community, continue to do that. And when you got to the community piece, I think, build it and they will come. Something that we've, I think, as a district worked on when we were going, I think we're teacher shortages. It was like, if you build the correct environment, teachers are going to either want to come or stay here. And I think what you guys are doing as a building is reflective of the entire district. So you guys are doing a great job. I think it's going to make it where new staff that comes on board is going to say, hey, this is where I want to be for a long time, which is something that as a district we need to continue to work on and improve. Great visit. Love to see the results tonight. And that just goes back to the hard work that all you guys and your entire staff are doing. So thank you very much. Continue the good work. And thank you. Thank you very much for a great visit and a great presentation tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to item D1, monitoring response, EL15. I believe every question was answered in compliance. There was no comments. So I will entertain a motion to accept the monitoring report.
I move we accept EL15 monitoring report.
Motion has been made by Director Stevenson. Can I get a second?
I second.
Seconded by Director Prowse. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item D2, we have a couple of GPs there. GP 8, Board Members Code of Conduct. There was what I think. There's question number 2. I'll read the question. It says, board members may not attempt to exercise individual authority over the organization except as explicitly set forth in board policies. Members' interaction with the superintendent or with staff must recognize the lack of authority vested in individuals except when explicitly authorized by the board. Members' interaction with the public, press, or other entities must recognize the same limitation and the inability of the board member to speak for the board except to repeat explicitly stated board decisions. Members will not publicly express individual negative judgments about the superintendent or administrator staff performance. Any such judgments of superintendent or staff performance will be made only by the full board. Meeting in executive session as appropriate. Members will refer to the superintendent or to his or her designated representative any complaints or concerns about operational issues. 4 answered in compliance. There was a in compliance with an exception, but there was no comment. I don't know if someone would like to share the exception.
There is a comment at the end, but it wasn't listed. Well, there's also question 3.
I see, yeah, but I didn't see a comment on question 2.
It says under question 5, the board commits to the following actions. There's 2 answered and 3 skipped. And so but those aren't listed. And so I don't know if the answers or the comments are there instead of, but we don't have those.
The comment on question 2, many times I feel we are pressured by the public, and to not cause disruption, I have often just agreed by a head nod, but I have learned we just need to speak up and let them know we are not taking sides. I usually say it's an operational item and we don't have the right to express our personal feelings. So could someone expand or elaborate on their comment? Does anybody remember making that comment?
So the comment sounds like it's in reference to the board members' feelings towards the comments they make with the public. Is that what everyone else interpreted as well? If in the future we can get these comments written in them, all of the comments, that would be great. Thank you.
I think it's me. I can't remember. I think I was saying that a lot of times I just agreed, especially at the beginning, not knowing what the outcome would be later. Okay. So I'm trying to think back. I think I did this at the very first day it came out for a change, and so I didn't even. I tried to take the thing over again, thinking.
And whether it was Sharon or not, it does say try to not. That individual's trying to not do that anymore, and that they've learned.
That I think I did nod a lot.
I don't have a problem, actually. I would like for that, now that I read the comment, for the actual comment to be there. And it's in compliance regardless, but it is a reminder to perhaps some of us about her intent with her comment. I've always said it, we're not a board member to be a board member. Our voices are relevant, our opinions are relevant, and we shouldn't be afraid to express those. That is the beauty of a democracy, where it's okay to disagree at times, but at the same time, as a unit, we come up with an answer. So no, I'm okay with the comment being left in. Is that okay?
I agree.
I agree.
I think it's good to leave the comment.
Question number 3 says, board members shall maintain the confidentiality appropriate to issues of a sensitive nature, especially those discussed in executive session. 4 answered in compliance, and 1 said not in compliance. And the comment, there is no comment. Who thought we weren't in compliance?
Wasn't me.
I can't remember, but maybe it was me. I think that in the past, I think we're on the right path as a board. But we have had issues in the last year of things we have discussed in executive session not staying in executive session. And so that is why I think we're not in compliance of that, because we have talked about things that have gotten out. So I was most likely me that put that then.
Okay, and go ahead, Ken.
Oh, and I could kind of agree. We have had some things get out of executive session. But when they do, we're all kind of surprised where it could possibly come from. I thought about that too, but without having definite proof or knowing I'm in compliance, and hopefully the issue will resolve itself in the future.
I hope so too. I'm hopeful. Like, I think
Yeah.
we're getting in the right direction. But yeah, we haven't done the best job in that.
And I can appreciate that you're bold enough to state that, Lindsay, if you think that was you. I would remind us all the importance of the confidentiality, especially in an executive session. There isn't anything that should be discussed that's discussed there, and that's problematic perhaps to the community. What's so important that you can't open up about? But there are some things like we know that has to remain in executive session. It is still in compliance, but I appreciate the fact that
Another perspective that I would like to bring, because I think that we were technically in compliance, but I think only by 3-2 last year with this exact same question, is the board is not the only ones in executive session.
Yeah.
There are staff in executive session. I'm not trying to lay any blame. There are also other people or groups that are discussed in executive session, and sometimes those groups or individuals are the ones that are sharing information with the public that we are all keeping potentially secretive is not the right word. Confidential, thank you, that's the right word. But they are not, and so there's been a lot of things potentially that could have been. I just don't want the public thinking that we're flapping our mouths about everything, because we kept Pete quiet. We didn't keep Pete quiet. We kept that detail quiet. We were very specific about that. We discussed that, and that was quite some time when there was a lot of people that were asking. And so not that we can't or haven't, there are other components that those things could have gotten out.
we are continuing to improve ourselves.
Yes.
And I think we're on the right track. And I don't have a problem with that. I would, question number 5, in order to maintain its commitment to excellence and governance to the board provisions of this policy and improve its own performance, the board commits to the following actions. And I need somebody's fingerprint over here. Continue to follow ethical and moral obligations. Continue to adhere to the code of conduct outlined in this GP. I would encourage us to hold ourselves accountable, especially with confidentiality matters. Let's keep in mind our goals for the district and how our actions can influence that, both positively and negatively. I appreciate both of those responses. And yes, all we can do is to continue to work on stuff, continue to make ourselves better. So thank you guys for the feedback.
Do we want to keep both those comments or just the second one? Does the second one encompass the first short, concise one?
If the author of the first one's okay with it, I'm okay with it. I don't know.
I don't think I'm the author of either, so.
I don't think, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think I was.
I think we can keep the second comment because I think it has the same verbiage.
Right.
So we'll keep
At
the
least-
second comment, not the first one. Thank you, Yessie. GP 14, governance process, students governing on boards. All of those questions were answered in compliance. And don't know if there was a comment at the end of that one, Jesse, for our commitment to excellence in governance. The last question, number 5. And there is no answers. I will remind ourselves that we need to continue committed. This is for us. This is for our betterment. So let's continue to adhere to that GP as well. Moving on to item E1, we have EL4, which is a final reading. We struck out a line from the EL. We agreed to it, and it is in here in the final reading form. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve EL4 as written.
There's been a motion made by Director Prowse. Can I get a second?
I'm Director Stevenson.
Stevenson, I'm sorry.
I second.
Seconded by Director Prowse. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item F1, the Board of Directors will recess into executive session for 15 minutes to review the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or lease. Want to thank everyone who's been here tonight. Those of you that are listening, appreciate it. We will recess for a couple minutes, and then we will enter to the executive session. Thank you very much.